Our guest today is something of a legend in the tabletop industry. He's an author and an Emmy-winning game designer who's worked on some of the highest quality supplements around. With nearly 20 years of experience in the business, he's pushing the boundaries of what adventures, modules, and supplements look like with projects like Eyes of the Stone Thief, which is a personal favorite of ours, the Dracula Dossier, and the upcoming, actually just released, Moria Through the Doors of Durin. It's Gareth Hanrahan. How you doing, Gareth? Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, always happy to wander in and talk GMing.
Yeah, and we have a lot to talk
No.
about. And you've worked on a lot of different projects. Before we get into that, I just want to mention something I saw on your website, which is you were or maybe are a computer programmer, and you decided to take a break, basically, to try it.
I won't say I decided. A break was given to me.
Gotcha. Okay.
Gotcha.
So you thought,
Okay.
let me make the most of this break to
Yeah.
try writing as a career. And
Yeah.
and you've written a bunch of novels too. So writing games specifically, was that always part of the plan, or were you
Yeah.
thinking I'm gonna go into this as a novelist?
God no. I mean, only a madman would go and start with novels. Then again, starting with games is also no one should go into writing as a career at all.
Yeah, it seems scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I done basically when I started gaming, I was writing a lot of stuff for our local games convention, WarpCon. And WarpCon had inherited this weird setup from the RPGA, where basically one person write a scenario, and then they run a tournament of like 20 tables or whatever. And that sort of basically taught you to write basically sort of for publication effectively back in the day, because your one scenario would have to be like run by 20 people, some of whom were quite drunk. Uh, so that meant I had written a lot of scenarios, and I ended up sending them to various companies going, look, I have basically a demo pack for you here. This is like a working scenario with 6 pre-gens. And that led to doing some freelancing. And then when the computer job downsized, I went, oh, I've got some savings and some freelance work lined up. How long can this go on for? And the answer is 20 something years at this point.
Yeah, we're still going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Interesting. So you were like,
absolutely, yeah, no plan, certainly.
right. So you were writing, what is the format of that? You're writing an adventure or an encounter for those tables?
Yeah, basically a 3-hour convention scenario. So basically,
Gotcha.
20 pages long, 6 pre-gens, and all laid out as simply as possible for the GM to be able to run it on the fly, basically.
People to
Pick
run
it
it
up
on the
quickly,
fly.
yeah.
I would always sheet at the back, how to run this game in 5 minutes.
Yeah, so that's something we're kind of. This is like I'm jumping so far ahead in the questions I wanted to ask, but we're thinking about that now too, like how to like run and how to lay out an adventure, how to present it in a way that is like as open as possible. And I feel like, I mean, you're writing those things for groups of 20 people. You have no idea,
Yeah.
like they could explore permutations you never thought of.
Well, absolutely. I mean,
Um,
that's part of the joy of it as well. Like, especially that context, because you'd guess, like, you'd hand it the game, they'd run, like 20 tables would run it, and then all the GMs would meet up afterwards. And you had these like fantastic sessions of, oh,
yeah.
my guys went this way, my guys did that. Like, there was one game where, and I'll try and tell as few war stories as possible.
Oh, that's
No,
why we're
please,
here.
yeah.
But there's one game where the setup was the characters were all members of this sort of 70s rock group, it was a Cthulhu game. And back in the day, they'd accidentally gotten high and done a ritual and summoned something. And the game is actually 20 years later when they're all sort of like aging rockers being brought back together for like a re-release of a classic record and so forth. They start working out, oh, we did something terrible 20 years ago. That's where our lead singer vanished and so forth. And most of the tables went up, oh, Cthulhu mystery, let's go up and do that. And then some tables went, oh yeah, we never got to the mystery. We were too busy, like, arguing over, like, who stepped with the drummer and who, like, who clashed those. But
Yeah, just doing a band simulator. That sounds
yeah.
fun too. So you mentioned a couple of things there that like
Mm,
stand out to me. The Cthulhu games is something you've written about. You wrote the
yeah,
Laundry Files RPG,
yeah.
which love the series, but very weird, like very strange setup. And then I mean, you've done the Gothic stuff, and then your books are basically dark fantasy.
Yep.
A really, really big mix of genres there. Are there any like common, I don't know, common themes or through lines in that? Like, what would you say you write about?
I don't know. I mean, one thing I know I'm good at is sort of being able to adapt to a particular setting or genre and sort of like, do a sort of good gaming pastiche of that genre. Like I can like you go in and identify what people really like or what seem to me to be the sort of unique selling points of that particular game or setting and sort of emphasize those. Um, the other thing as well is just, and this is possibly from running like doing those convention games back in the day, being really, really focused on actual utility at the table. Like I can't write endless streams of background, but my instinct is always to go, hang on, how would this actually get into play at the table? How will the GM convey this to the players? How will the players be able to use this to make decisions? Like there's the whole like your classic thing of like you're writing like 30 pages of background and there's no way for the players to actually learn any
Yeah.
of that. That has its place. There are people who like buy books to read them as opposed to play them, but I've always tried tact towards the how does this actually hit the table? How does this get used? Um,
Yeah, it's very practical.
yeah,
That's something we want to focus on a little bit today too, because something we like to ask about is like sort of your big ideas as a GM. Um, and I guess before I do that, I have to ask the preliminary question: how'd you get into GMing in the first place? Because it's one thing to read a bunch of books and play in games, but as the craft of GMing in particular, how did you get into that?
basically what happened was I was hugely into Tolkien, still am. When I was 11, I think the local library did a Tolkien day where basically a bunch of guys from the local college gaming society ran a table of MERP. And I had no idea what gaming was, never heard of it. They said, "Oh, we need a player. You be with the back." And I got handed a character sheet which began, "You are an elf who has passed through Moria." And I went, "Don't know what this is. Best game ever." I thought this. And then I spent about a year trying to work out what I'd actually played because this is like pre-internet, pre-Google. Like the only way to actually work out what the game was to basically go into game stores, and there weren't many game stores in Ireland. So it was like, was this it? It was in a box. Maybe this is it. But later on, I got a copy of original Red Box D&D and didn't know any other gamers for a while. Converted like various cousins, friends to gaming, or tried to, and then finally met up with some gamers. But even back then, it was pretty much like not the always GM, but like the default GM. Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, so actually, I'm what not. It's not that I was completely self-taught because I had that like initial experience to go, okay, this is how a game works. But other than that first game, I was like for like say 2 years, which I was the regular GM.
Yeah, and you were kind of driving that, it sounds like, right? You're trying to put the group together, you're trying to teach others. I
Yeah,
imagine it would be hard to connect, especially in Ireland. I know, so in Galway, now there's
yeah,
a popular game store. They sell donut. I got a dice
yeah,
set from there, actually. I'm looking
yeah.
on my shelf right now. I remember very fondly. And it seemed like the scene was like, I mean, I was there on a Sunday afternoon. There was dozens of people there playing games. Is it different now, you think? I mean, there's sort of an explosion of that thing. How's the
I mean,
scene in Ireland?
yeah, I mean, it seems to be going fine. I mean, there's a game shop in Cork now, and I go in and I know no one, which is wonderful because they're going.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. The Irish scene has always been slightly odd. Back when I was in college, back when I was starting out, there was a fantastic convention scene where basically each college have its own little convention. So there's literally a convention circuit where you can go around the country
Yeah, cool.
and be like, one con a month pretty much. All like tiny ones, but still fun. It sort of dropped off for a while, and now like with the grand resurgence of D&D, it's coming back. Like I had the weird experience. My kids will be going into secondary school, so high school equivalent, next year. So we went around to all the local schools, to, like the open nights to see what they were like, and they were all going, "Oh yeah, we've got like football team, hurling team, debate club, D&D club," as
Wow.
like one of their top line. Like this is it. So yeah, the scene seems to be fine. I'm like a bit out in touch as I used to be, but yeah, it's everything seems to be quite healthy. for the moment.
Yeah, there's that resurgence that happened
Yeah.
maybe 10 years ago. Tristan, you
Mhm.
started a D&D club at your school 10 years
I
ago.
did, yeah. It was kind of a night. I mean, it was good. It was fun, but it was kind of a nightmare because same kind of situation where there's never quite enough GMs. So we tried to start it up, and then this huge crowd of people rolled in who had kind of been interested.
And
Uh,
how many of those would have like been watching some of the Critical Role? Because that's sort of like the
Yeah,
massive
Yeah,
change.
no,
Yeah.
I
that
think that's what it
that was a
was.
big part of it, is a lot of them
Yeah.
had, even if they like didn't like watch full episodes, they'd seen like clips and stuff, or like, like little edits online. So that a lot of them had seen pieces, and that was kind of what got them interested enough
Yeah.
to show up and try it.
Because gaming is always, once you actually see it played, it's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
a click, so that's how it works.
Yeah,
Trying to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
trying to explain it on like via text is really, really hard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just a conversation, right? You're sitting
Yeah.
around a table, you're having a conversation with your friends, ideally. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to kind of explain how the whole thing works. But then once you've experienced it, it's like you go into the library and playing your elf who's escaped Moria. I'll be like, oh, like I get it now. I get it. Yeah, I learned from a book, right? I just went down to the local bookstore and bought it was the box set for, I guess it was third edition D&D,
Hmm.
and just like played from the box. And that's hard. I mean, especially
Only,
like you're a kid, you have no
like,
basis for it.
yeah, and you think like, this is this looks like a board game. This feels like
Yeah.
it should be a board game. I've seen board games like this, but like in a board game, you like what do I roll to move?
Yeah.
It's the conceptual leap, which
Yeah,
is
it's
really hard
tough.
to articulate. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to get into a couple of your big ideas here, and especially with an eye to like how GMs can apply them at the table. Because the lab is mostly, we have some beginners in there, but it's a lot of people who are, I would say, intermediate or advanced. They've been running games for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Um, and we talk a lot about 13th Age in the lab, because that is when we play a fantasy game, that's the one we play.
Yeah.
So just with that kind of audience in mind, something that we're very interested in is like the designing encounters as sort of the fundamental unit of adventure design.
Yeah.
Basically, rather than sitting down to write an adventure, you're thinking about the next encounter that you need to run.
Mhm.
And something that strikes us about Eyes of the Stone Thief, which is just kind of on my mind lately, is that every encounter feels like it's designed rather than sort of randomly rolled. I mean,
Mhm.
there's the occasional wandering monster situation, but like I mean, it's really tight too. It's like half a page. Here's an encounter with the blind orc seer, right? Here's an encounter that's underwater, right? That kind of thing. Um, what is your process for designing those? Like when you sit down and you were writing, Eyes of the Stone Thief or whatever, you're like, all right, I'm going to write some encounters set in Deep Keep. What does that look like? How did you decide what to write next?
I mean, I had a vague idea of like, how the dungeon should flow. Like, I basically, when I started it, I wrote down basically a lot of like, sort of cool ideas about like dungeon levels, like, what are the sort of classic archetypal.
Don't know.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
dungeon levels are one
Arc
of those.
something, yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And like went back and looked at also all my favorite dungeons of the past and stuff like. Have you ever seen Nightmare? Oh, Nightmare was this TV series on UK TV back in the 80s. And basically, it was this kid wearing this helmet, and they had a green screen effect. And so you basically walk into a dungeon, and he was blindfolded by the helmet, so he couldn't see. But there were three other kids watching through basically CCTV, which is like a magic mirror, and they would go like, turn left, turn right, walk forward,
Yeah.
and there were actors in the dungeons. So it's basically like CGI live role playing. But I watched that at a very, very impressionable age, so it's like a deep, deep psychological like view of fantasy. So a lot of it was basically like trying to capture that sort of feel of walking into a strange room and going like, what's going on here? Um, but yeah, for the actual mechanics and like feel of the encounter, a lot of it was basically just going, okay, this dungeon is because like, with a normal dungeon where basically like, you've got a fixed map and the players can move through it and like when if they're turning left from room 3, they're always going to room 4 as opposed to Stone Thief, which is all messed up. With a traditional dungeon, part of the joy is the sort of unexpected ramifications of development. Like, the players have set room 3 on fire. There's now smoke in the corridor on the way to room 4, and the guys in room 5 are going, "What the hell is going on out there? Why can I see? Why can I smell smoke?" And you have these encounters sort of ideally sort of build on themselves, and as they get more complicated. Stone Thief can't do that to the same degree because it moves around. It's reshuffled. So each encounter, I want it to be super, super interesting in isolation. So that was basically going, okay, I know I can't just do a straight fight of 6 orcs in a room. How do I make this room different and interesting each time? So, and there's a lot of sort of leaning on theme for inspiration. So okay, this is the level of undead stuff. I now need to basically have weird auras and animation effects and things like bursting out of crypts because I need to add something new in every encounter. So what new stuff can I drag from the sphere of undead related stuff? What new stuff can I do with orc stuff? Like that's, for example, there's the arena fight in there where you can get thrown into a orcish fighting arena. That was basically okay. How how can I make it an orky fight more interesting? Okay, it's a sort of Coliseum-esque thing. Honestly, another big inspiration for that was just playing World of Warcraft back in the day, where they would have sort of team boss fights and sort of going, okay, this is going to feel it's a bit Disney theme park-esque, where basically it's very much focused on the fun, and you make it fun, and then you do your sort of conceptual backfilling and make it feel more serious and coherent.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
a great design. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that's the point, right?
Yeah.
It should be fun. I wonder if I'm a GM sitting down to write either write an adventure, because I think a lot of people sit down and think I'm going to write, whether maybe they have a little publishing company, maybe they're writing, for a game they're running just for their friends. If I sit down and think to myself, how can I make every encounter memorable and stand on its own? Just like as a baseline, imagine I'm writing Stone Thief and I don't know what order they're going to hit these in. So every single one has to be memorable. I think even if you're running a traditional dungeon that doesn't shuffle around, probably your dungeon benefits from that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
the downside is it's just a lot of conceptual headaches because you have to you
Yeah,
can't,
a lot of work.
which is the great advantage of published scenarios, because someone else does half the work for you. But yeah, I think that there's the whole sort of funhouse dungeon idea, where basically every encounter is unique and sort of wacky and weird and different, and the classic, in this room there is a man with a giant long beard who talks to birds, and in this room there's a dragon, and even though they're right next to each other, they never talk. That sort of, I feel like, undermines the realism of the world to a degree that you can't take it seriously. So the Stone Thief is, to a large degree, is how can I justify a series of individually nonsensical encounters? What can I come up with overall cosm where they make sense and it feels like a coherent setting? Which is where the whole Moby Dick shark eating dungeon, or dungeon eating bits of the world.
Yeah, yeah,
came
no, but
from.
you've
Yeah,
unified it. And this is we're gonna get a little technical here. But I think that's good. So you've unified. I'm thinking in particular of the level of Deep Keep, right? So people who haven't played or run the adventure, it's a mega dungeon, and there's a lot more going on to it than that.
Yeah.
But there's one level that is like all these fortresses crammed together, and the orcs live inside. And there's a series of encounters in there that are all very different. But there's a fighting arena, which you mentioned. There's a sort of fortune teller seer who the players can pretty easily fool into thinking that they are orcs when they're talking to her. There's a temple room. There's slave pits where there's maybe this rebellion going on. They're all very different. But you've unified the whole thing mechanically with this alarm level, right? So they are actually tied together. Maybe the seer, we don't have to write in the adventure, the
Yeah.
seer goes and talks to, the guy in charge of the fight pits or whatever. There is a floor mechanic that kind of unifies those things, and you've abstracted how the encounters kind of add to each other, right? So if something happens in the seer room, you don't need to write in your adventure book that you're writing exactly what happens in all the other rooms. You can abstract it to this level of, well, the alarm goes up, and then now I roll on a different table for reinforcements, or maybe the fight in this room just looks at, okay, what's the alarm level? Okay, add 2 more demons. I think that's a really elegant way of doing it, actually, because in practice, that's kind of all you need. I feel like it's over designed to do more than that in a lot of
Yeah.
cases.
I mean, just two conversation tangents here. Deep Keep, like that, and also Deep Keep's place in the whole adventure. Yeah, I mean, like in a sort of ideal world where the GM has complete informational awareness and can keep the whole dungeon in their head at once, which like some people can do, especially if it's dungeon you've written. You can go, aha, I remember that there are like Sturges 4 levels up, and they patrol around here, and they will smell the smoke from the burning room, or whatever. If you can sort of do it organically and like work out what the ramifications of the dungeon are and make it a like fantastic environment, yay, that's great. But I mean, GMing is already a huge conceptual load on the GM, so anything you can do to make it easier is a good thing, and especially published scenarios. Basically, you want to sort of give the players the impression that it's this fantastic, interconnected living world, but not ask the GM to basically track. Okay, this was this is this. Like back in the day, I worked on Gamma World, and we had this fantastic sort of conceptual map thing where basically like if your settlement like runs out of food, then that impacts this like this thing, and like that impacts morale, and morale impacts social cohesion, and social cohesion will plug on to like less guards, and less guards mean more monster attack. And it was supposed to be this sort of like adventure generator thing, but in practice it was just so hard to sort of like track every single change that it didn't really pay off enough. So the Deep Keep was a much sort of simpler, more like more cheesy way of doing it. Like it feels, yeah. It doesn't say like the orcs from Room 7 come here. You just assume that there is a pool of orcs somewhere out there who will run these reinforcements, and the players don't really need to like the orcs aren't tagged. They're not like
Yeah,
track
that's
the
what it
name
is,
every
right?
individual orc. Yeah.
Yeah, because what the players interact with is kind of like for their perception of it, they don't really care about the train of thought that gets them there, right? They only notice the sort of the consequences of their actions, which in Deep Keep is just like there's more orcs or angrier orcs or different orcs, but it's all kind of orc themed. And so if they end up caring, you can just make up the reason on the spot later.
Yeah. But the players want to feel that there's that level of complexity and like realism
Yeah.
in the world.
Mhm.
Well, it's hard for the GM, so basically you try to fake it, and the classic thing, like fake it and smiling to the players, going, oh, yes.
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
orcs,
Oh, yeah.
you're
Roll some
right.
dice
Those,
behind the
those,
screen.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Those orcs were from Room 7. You're quite right. Like, well done.
Yeah.
But one reason that Deep Keep though has that level of added complexity and difficulty as opposed to the rest of the dungeon is because Deep Keep was one of the sort of choke points. Because
Yeah.
when writing a big adventure, like the players can go in any direction, but you can't. Well, it depends on the style of adventure you're doing. But for one like this, you want to basically sort of drag them back down to the point. So no matter what path they take the dungeon, they'll have to go through Deep Keep because it's sort of the choke point for lower levels, which is a really handy way of constraining a giant book. Basically,
Yeah, no, that makes
From
sense
just
just from a
branching off.
practical,
Yeah.
practical sense. I will leave this topic alone after this, but would love your opinion because I think Tristan and I have different approaches to this, where I am perfectly happy to just sort of simulate all the stuff happening in the background. And Tristan's a much better note taker and has a lot better attention to detail than I am when running games. I mean, Tristan, if you were running Deep Keep, would you track something like, oh, this particular warlord is the one who responds to this action taken, or would you just purely abstract it?
I think I would abstract it. I think it would depend. I'm coming around more to that to that style just because I
Nice.
can't for like little dungeons that I've made myself and I know the layout and the people really well. I sometimes I'm a little more minute with that, where this smoke drifts up the corridor and this dude can smell it or whatever. But I think Deep Keep especially, and I mean I am kind of curious about, because you were talking about broader dungeon structure and tracking and stuff, and I feel like Stone Thief and like most 13th Age adventures that I've read or run, and a lot of kind of other similar things, do a really good job at like placing those choke points kind of carefully that you were talking about, because there's, this assumption that we're here to play and we have to, follow the follow the hooks the GM set, or we don't get to play tonight. But you also kind of want to encourage that freedom that tabletop games can uniquely do. So I'm curious, like when you're setting up sort of big, I guess they don't have to be big adventures, but especially like big, that giant hardcover book. How do you try to structure it and set it up in a way where and I thought Stone Thief did a really good job with this, but like they can sort of pursue their own ends and engage with stuff sort of creatively and forge their own paths, but also without, like you were saying, all these different paths, rocket out and it balloons to this 2,000 page monstrosity or whatever.
I think the key there is making sure that the point of the campaign is clear but flexible. So like Stone Thief, it is like, the game is you're going to kill this dungeon. It's just like, living dungeon. It's Moby Dick. You're the dungeon. The dungeon's up to you. Dracula Dossier similarly is whatever else happens, you're going to fight Dracula at the end. So basically, you can then incorporate whatever the players come up with and whatever tangents they go on into that, as opposed to going, okay, I've got this like tightly bound, like, here's what's going to happen on this schedule, and the player stuff is a distraction away from that, or like, if we find the player stuff, we'll miss our schedule there. So a lot is just basically building in sufficient flexibility to the concept, which often means like, sort of not writing half the book in some ways, because like, you could do a more tightly bound adventure where, like, here's exactly how the players kill the Stone Thief, as opposed to writing like 10 different versions in, like, in some cases fairly rough detail, like, they could get a behemoth, maybe, I don't know, if there are behemoths in your campaign and they can find a behemoth and lure the dungeon. I have no idea how they do this, or maybe the world ends and then there's time travel. I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what my players are doing.
Yeah.
Is they're getting a Koru over.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, when you're writing, this is going back to, like, the idea of like stuff being useful at the table. At some point, you have to sort of let go and trust the GM. I often find that when I'm writing like any sort of adventure, but either campaigns or long ones, that the like first 2 or 3 sessions, or like what to play in the book, will be done in fantastic detail. But then the more, like, the later the campaign goes on, the less useful detail you can provide. You're providing much more like options and suggestions and vague ideas to GM. And you just trust that they've got the vibe of the campaign and everyone's on the same page. And it's even convention scenarios, like, I would always go, okay, I'll spend like half the adventure on the first 3 scenes, because once you reach that sort of launch velocity, and like once the player, if everyone like hits the ramp and is going up at the same speed, and they're all going to, like, land roughly in the same place. I'm not sure that metaphor works, but anyway.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's nice when we have a game that kind of helps us do that. I think there's some mechanics. I'm thinking, I said I'd leave it alone, but I won't. 13th Age icon dice, I think, are good at that, kind of keeping us on track. I feel like if I am trying to simulate like a complicated political world happening in the background of my game, I can just ignore a lot of that. I can roll some icon dice and be like, oh yeah, so through some complex web of happenings that I don't know, it is the elf queen who is interested in what happened here today, and she's going to get involved. That's so nice to have. I think a lot of games need more of that kind of structure.
The way I always sort of explain icon dice in this context is as conceptual glue. Like, if, like, you create a character and you go, oh, my character's girlfriend was taken by a vampire, that's why I hate undead. And Bob created the character, my character was made in a lab by a necromancer, that's why I'm connected to the undead. In a regular roleplay game, which isn't about icon dice, those characters either be totally disconnected, basically, he's the necromancer, I've got the vampire I hate, they don't really matter. Or if you bind them too close together and you go, aha, the necromancer who created Bob is also the vampire who stole my girlfriend, then that's an adventure as opposed to a campaign. But with Icon Dice, you can go, okay, Lich King connection, Lich King connection. The players both get to, like, you know, have their chosen backstory. They both feel like okay, I've had my idea and it's going to be part of the campaign. But their characters are connected because they both have a Lich King connection. So you can go, aha, Bob will now help me hunt down the vampire because the vampire will help him find the necromancer or whatever. It just makes everything easier to plug together, which is a lovely trick.
Yeah, the glue is a good
Yeah.
metaphor, I think. We think of, we talk about in one of the books, was the first or second one, conflicts. Like, conflicts are the thing that binds a party together because if there's a conflict that they both have a stake in, two different characters, they have a stake in the same conflict. They can come from really, really different backgrounds, but you can, like, get them in the adventure pointed in the same direction together much more easily. So we talk about conflicts as a focus of world building a lot. The Lich King's a good example of that, right? He's the Lich guy. There's undead everywhere.
Yeah.
Any undead happening, you could connect to him. You could say, well, your character would be interested in this because, and it's this really nice background for it. So here's my follow-up question about that then. How do you actually, because this is sort of controversial, how do you use icon dice at your table? Do you roll every session, every adventure? How do you do that?
I'm trying to remember the last one. Once actually run 13th Age, not at a con. What I would normally do in a campaign is I'd roll maybe every session, or at least every, like, you know, two or three sessions, and basically get the players to like decide what that means. Like, you know, basically you can cash in your icon benefit or your icon benefit for somebody, either mechanical or story based. Like for example, there's one game was running where there was the character in a city under siege. One player had a dwarf king benefit hanging around. He went, okay, can I use this to say there's a bunch of dwarven masons in town who will help fix the wall? I went, yeah, cool. Describe these dwarven masons. Give me, like, the name of one of them. Give me a one character trait and one weird thing about them. The player gets the benefit of having, like, you know, the wall fixed. I get some extra NPCs to play with. Everyone's happy. And if like, you know, once most of them have been used, it's like sort of time to roll again. If a player has been able to find a good time to use it, I would journal it, so, like, cash it in for a magic item or some benefit. I would also occasionally go, like, you know, okay, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Everyone roll their icon dice, and, like, you use that to influence the story, quote unquote. But I find that only works if the players feel to have a large spread of icons, and also only one player actually rolls a 6.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
nothing more annoying than, like, you know, okay, what's, like, you know, I'm not sure what this, like, story element is here. Oh, we've got, like, Elf Queen and Dwarf King and Archmage and Orc Lord. There's a convention on.
That
Yeah, it can get messy.
yeah.
Yeah.
that segues really nicely, I feel like, into because Jonah and I kind of relatively recently were reading through the Book of Ages, which, for people who haven't read it, has this system for kind of collaboratively setting up the past of the setting. And I have talked, it's like, it's weirdly controversial. Like, I've talked with a lot of GMs who feel really strongly about, like, you know, I set up the setting, and that they, because, you know, you're talking about kind of letting players interpret the icon dice. What's your philosophy on, like, the collaboration between the GM and the players?
I mean, my sort of, if I was going to sum up my GMing philosophy in one sentence, it should be chase enthusiasm. The basically, whatever the players find fun, that's what you want the game to be about. Like, so, I'm very like, careful about being scripted to say, like, you know, this is the way to play. This is, like, you know, the right GMing call, particular situation. This is the right way to handle a particular scenario, because different things are just true for different groups. I can say which ones I think would work better for my players, or for the majority of groups, or for a particular style of play, but there's never really a right or wrong answer. For that sort of collaborative stuff with the players, what I find is most useful on both sides, both for the GM and for the players is, and I started talking about this in Book of Ages, is very, very sort of carefully calibrated questions. Basically, you don't want to say to go to the player, like, go back to the siege thing. Like, I wouldn't say to the player, like, you have this dwarf king benefit. It helps you with the siege. Tell me how. I might go like, with your dwarf king benefit, there's someone in the town who can help you with the siege. Who is that person? Or like, not like, create this whole civilization, but like, tell me one thing that is interesting about this ancient civilization underground or something. You basically give them, so scope out the area which they can contribute, because then you can sort of wall that off from the important bits of your plot. So because you don't want to have a situation where, like, your game is going to be about, or your adventure setup is, we're going at sea and we're shipwrecked on a mysterious island, and you don't want to go to the player, oh, tell me what it's about the ship, and the player goes, oh yes, it's a flying ship that's unsinkable. But you go like, tell me one interesting thing about the one thing you're suspicious about with the captain, or one ancient tradition that is false about seafaring. Basically, give the players enough space they can be creative, but also enough of a prompt that they won't impact on the sort of the bones of the game, so to speak, and also that they're not completely in the dark, because it's hard. People who can be spontaneously creative on the fly tend to end up being GMs, whereas a lot of, and again, this is like, not being trying to be prescriptive, because some players really want to be like, involved and creative and spontaneous. Other players have just come in from, like, a long day coding, or, I don't know, doing brain surgery or whatever players do. Those real jobs. And they just want to kill orcs and don't want to, like, you have to, like, spontaneously improvise a poem about killing orcs. This is what it does. And again, both fine, but you want to basically, like, find out what your players really, really like and give them lots of that. And if the players like being collaborative and creative, give them lots of that, but in a way that won't mess up your own plans too much.
Right. So you're limiting you're asking questions, you're asking them to participate in the setting building and the world building and stuff. It helps them get invested in the world, but you're saying you want to be really careful in the scope of your questions
Yeah.
so you can carve out exactly the right space.
Or sometimes don't. Like, I have run 13th Age convention games where I've gone, okay, I won't have any scenario prepped at all. I will, like, get the players to do their one unique things and their relationships, and then, like, on the spot, improvise a scenario around that. And that is a fantastic conjuring trick. It's like the equivalent, like, pulling tablecloth under the crockery, because players go, oh wow, look at this level of, like, improvisation.
Look at him go, yeah.
But I wouldn't recommend that for a regular campaign, because it's a headache, and also it's like, there's a lot of illusionism in there too. It's like, aha, look, I've magically improvised this whole campaign around your suggestions. It was always going to be a fight with these stats. I've just painted those stats with, like, rock faces or dragon faces.
That's the fundamental GMing trick, I think.
Absolutely,
yeah. Making it look like it was your idea all along. Yeah. I don't want to take up too much of your time here. This is something that when we were doing research for this interview, we were looking at just the shocking number of things that you've written. Adventures, games, supplements, and a lot of it is for stuff that we never heard of before. Like, I didn't know that there was a Laundry Files RPG, and now I want to play it. So there's a lot of the posters on the lab are sort of RPG junkies. They're the people who, although a lot of them play a lot of the systems too. A lot of them are collectors, and they want to try new things and find new things. So we just want to ask you some questions about your favorites and your recommendations. Are there a few lesser known games or systems that you think people should try? They don't get enough play.
Let me think. I mean, I was not careful here, but the instinct is to sort of, start listing stuff I've worked on or stuff by friends of mine.
Don't worry, we'll get to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, trying to think of sort of interesting stuff. I mean, every I have this alarming theory that like all the really interesting design stuff happened in like the early 70s, and like
That's
um,
a hot take. Tell me more about that. Why
but
is that?
have you read Playing at the World, which I'm actually reading at the moment? John
No, I
Peterson's.
I read The Emergent Shift, and I have Playing at the World, but I haven't read it yet.
I think Play at the World is it's covered a more interesting time. And the Emergent Shift, is that the one which basically feels like reading the forum page of Dragon magazine?
Kind of, yeah. It's like it's a lot of stuff from like old school zines where people are arguing about like what the game is basically
Yeah.
before they figured out what is a role playing game. Yeah.
But Playing at the World is also stuff about the early campaigns, which is basically like it was diplomacy, only they were also doing war games, and then one guy was playing the Orc King. And like, there was just absolutely wild stuff going on there. And while the mechanics were dire, like I think they sort of covered a lot of like improvisation and player creativity and like the whole drama narrative simulation trifecta back in the early days. Because again, role playing is just a conversation. I mean, in terms of actual real novelty, in terms of mechanics, as opposed to just like sort of handling stuff. I don't know, like something Dread or something is the only thing I can think of that really is like miss the paradigm, or like weird 4G story stuff and story games and so forth. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
you. I think I read some. I'm misquoting you, and I
yeah.
apologize. But at least you're here to correct me. And I didn't write the quote down. Something about how the release of fifth edition D&D has homogenized a lot of tabletop gaming.
Did I say that? I can imagine I said that. Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, is that true? You think?
I'm trying to remember the context where I said when I said that. But yeah, I'm not sure if homogenous is the right word, but there's a weird effect with online play and like actual play and so forth, whereas previously, I said you learn GMing basically by either by doing or by watching watching one of the GM. Now we have this thing where there's a right way to GM, or people think there's like they're sort of emulating what they've seen on the internet as opposed to what they've
Yeah.
encountered in play. And there's also the whole weird divide, or not weird, but sort of interesting thing where people are using 5e for stuff that would probably work better in another game.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just play a different system. I'm begging you. Yeah.
But, again, I hesitate to beg them. I sort of feel like on one level, yes, you are absolutely using like a screwdriver to hammer the nail, and there's a more efficient way to do it. But if you really like your screwdriver and you're going to flip your screwdriver around and screw in a screw in 2 minutes time, maybe it makes sense. Like whatever people want. If people are having fun, that's the
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
They're playing a game
yeah.
that's interesting to them.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
they're
know.
playing Harry Potter, D&D 5e, whatever. It's like,
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, if that's the game you want to play, if that's what's getting your friends to the table,
exactly. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
if if like the trade off is using this inappropriate system, but the players already know it, and players don't want to learn the system, and yeah, go ahead. Another group would do much better with a customized game
yeah.
for that setting. Another group would be better dragging out Ars Magica and change the names. But anyway,
Yeah, well, it's a weird balance, isn't it? Because it's simultaneously, so in the age of, Critical Role and
Hmm.
the sort of Mercer effect, there's also probably more better niche systems than there's ever been. Because you can kickstart, people will
Yeah.
back anything. You can kickstart anything. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a right answer for role playing is such a it's what works for your group, and you might not know what works for your group until you experiment a bit. So so I guess by like thing you advise to play is basically anything and everything, and just like mess around and see what
See what
because like
works. Yeah.
I mean, like my group, because they're actually the same, like they're the same people we've been playing with since like that Red Rocks D&D back in like high school 30 years ago.
It's awesome.
Like like I know that they will if I like drag out some weird indie game. Like we were playing Jason Statham's Big Adventure there, which is this Grant Howlett one-page thing. They'll play it, they'll have fun, but they would like we've now gone back to playing second edition Werewolf, and like we were they were comfortable with that, and like that's what works for that group. And like I tried doing a Apocalypse World with them, and just bounced off completely. Apocalypse World, fantastic game, not right for that group.
Yeah. Yeah, you just gotta.
Yeah.
So much of this is so group dependent too.
Yeah.
Like people come, they'll ask questions on the lab sometimes that I think they expect have an objective answer. They just don't. Just your friends, your group.
Yeah.
You can find something that works.
It's like like I guess music is possibly the best metaphor to use. Like you can like if you are a virtuoso violinist, then you could pretty much like be playing with an orchestra as opposed to a thrash metal group. And if like if all your friends are super thrash metal and you're a violinist, then either you like you pick up a guitar and play it a bit, or you create something weird and new. But it's not like you will be the one creating that doesn't exist at the moment. It's a weird hobby, really.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of unlike anything else. We're trying
Mm-hmm.
to, if you are trying to explain it to someone who hasn't played a game before and you say it's just a conversation, the closest I feel like we can get is if they've seen an improv show.
Yeah.
Like, it has a lot to do with kind of drama and theater.
There's I think it was Greg Stoltze who pretty sure it was Greg has this intro in I think it's in Under Armies where he just calls it like improvised radio theater. Because because the radio part gets the idea of like it's purely verbal. There's no there's no pictures, there's no acting. It's just like I walk over to the table and pick this up. But even that doesn't really convey half the appeal of it, because it's not just about the acting and the dialogue. It's also the action, it's also tactical, it's also the mysteries, it's also storytelling, or it can be depending on your group and your game. It's 4 or 5 hobbies in a trench coat.
Yeah, stacked up. Well, of all the things we've talked about today, the thing I don't know actually is what are you working on now? What's next for you after Moria?
I mean,
Or after the book, I guess.
Moria is like 10, well, not 10 years, like 2 or 3 years in the past in terms of.
I guess so, yeah. And the novel probably is too, huh? Because it's releasing. Yeah.
Novels are much long. Actually, that's not true. Like role-playing games can be turned around a lot more quickly than novels, because like the novels are there was a big publisher. They're like with Orbis, who are part of Hachette. So they're one of the really big publishers. So for them, my deadline is a year in advance. For role-playing games, the deadlines tend to be a bit sooner, but there's then more work because novels are like you edit them, you click the layout is like fairly simple. Whereas role-playing games have layers of play testing and development, and then the layout of a role-playing game is this whole other art.
Yeah.
For sure. There's a long lead time. Anyway, that was not the question you asked at all. What's next? Next novel is out end of the month, The Sword Triumphant. In terms of actual writing stuff, I'm doing the Terraforming Mars role-playing game with Ken.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we'll go back to that in a sec.
Yeah.
I'm putting together some backer stuff for Trail of Cthulhu, 2nd edition. I'm doing a scenario for Beyond the Woods, which is this Irish theme and D&D setting. I'm working on a game which is currently called Foot Patrol. It's also been called Shires Out. It is basically cozy murder mysteries in a serial numbers straight off version of the Shire, where basically you're playing half-in detective solving crimes. What else am I working on?
You just listed like 7 things. How can there be more?
Yeah, God damn.
There's a lot more. I mean, some of them are quite small, some of them are big.
Yeah.
Some of them are big, but are being worked on very, very slowly. But I mean,
What's the next to release?
next release is the novel, and then Trail second edition, I think. Yeah, that would be the.
Nice.
All
Okay.
right, so that's what we'll tell. Look,
Awesome.
folks,
Yeah.
check out the book, The Sword Triumphant. That's what you should look out for.
Indeed.
Trials of Cthulhu, second edition coming out.
Yep.
Tell me about the Terraforming Mars role-playing game. That's not something I knew was even being considered. This is fun.
It got kickstarted there, start of the year. We're working on it. The gimmick here is we want to basically play with generational play. So you set up, you roll up your first set of characters, they're working for a corporation, you're given a project to work out, and it's like, there's a, the sample scenario we've done is you're in charge of digging a mohole, which is this shaft into the Martian crust to release heat and gases and so forth to kickstart the terraforming process. There's various decisions you've got to make. There's various bits of corporate intrigue. But the unique selling point of the game is that you will play through the most interesting 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 years of those characters' lives, and then you will skip on to the next generation, and they will be in some way connected to your previous characters, but not necessarily it's not going to be you're working for the same corporation. It might be you're now playing the guys who are living in the pocket of warmth in the bottom of the mohole in this little mining town, and instead of being these corporate troubleshooters who were in the previous generation, you're now hard-scrabble miners being oppressed by the corporation. And the most interesting part of their lives is when you have to decide whether or not to join this Martian resistance and so forth, and it's all sort of rise against the corporate pressures. And then the next generation after that, you could be switching over to war correspondents working for the media corporation who are reporting on this ongoing brush war between the corporation and the miners and so forth. And basically you play through literally the terraforming of Mars over hundreds and hundreds of years. Because in the Kim Stanley Robinson novels, which the game is heavily inspired by, he went, they invent immortality, so the same characters through the 1,000-year process. We're not going to do that, so you'll switch characters every so often, but it'll all be one big story, but we'll maintain novelty by having you switch characters. So we lots of stuff there about how to basically set up each generation's conflicts and novelties and build on what you've already established, while also keeping to our overall campaign structure.
Wow, cool. So you've basically figured out how can we make a character-driven, because that's the appeal, I think, of a tabletop game is, you're character-driven and it's about the drama at the table. Maybe people disagree with me on that. I don't know. It's one of the big selling points. But in a game that takes place over hundreds of years, I imagine, you just focus on the juicy bits, only the drama. That's cool.
That's cool.
All right, keep an eye out for that too. If people are interested in following you, finding more of your work, where's a good place to do that?
GarethHanrahan.com is sort of the easiest thing. There's a newsletter there. There's links to my Blue Sky and so forth. And I update it occasionally. And that's just the one-stop shop.
Great. Well, that's where they can find you. Thanks so much for joining us today, Gareth.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thanks for your time.
No, always so happy to talk about GMing. It is a topic I really care about.
Yeah, no, us too.
Yeah, and it's rare to be able to nerd out about it in particular, as opposed to here is how this game gets GM'd. But it's love to have abstract discussions, even though if they do get, as we said, very, 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 very branchy.
Yeah. No, the craft of GMing itself is not talked about enough.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today. Thanks so much for your time.
Not at all.